Beneath the gentle hills of Turkey rests an entire hidden world. This is the story of the massive underground cities of Cappadocia, vast subterranean metropolises carved deep into the earth. By the end, you will understand not just how they were built, but the profound and chilling reason why. What kind of threat drives an entire civilization to retreat into the dark for months, or even years? Were they simply hiding from enemies, or from something far more ancient and terrifying? We will explore the incredible engineering, uncover the theories of a forgotten cataclysm, and discover what these stone refuges reveal about our own instinct to survive. What does it take for a society to prepare for the end of the world? The story of these hidden cities begins not with human hands, but with the earth itself. Long before the first tunnel was carved, the very landscape of Cappadocia was preparing a perfect canvas. This region is a masterpiece of ancient geology, a place where the ground beneath your feet tells a story of fire and time. It is built upon a thick layer of volcanic tuff, a rock with a unique and almost magical property. Imagine a substance as firm as stone, yet as workable as hardened clay. This tuff is the result of countless volcanic eruptions over millions of years, which deposited layers of ash that compressed into a soft, porous rock. It is strong enough to hold the weight of entire cities stacked vertically, but soft enough that it could be shaped with the simplest of bronze or even stone tools. This was the first and greatest gift from nature, a material that invited creation. Without this specific geological condition, the underground metropolises would have been impossible. The famous fairy chimneys that dot the surface, those towering, whimsical stone spires, are merely the above-ground expression of this same eroding tuff. While wind and water sculpted those wonders for all to see, below the surface lay an even greater potential, a blank slate of stone waiting for a civilization with a pressing need to hide. This soft rock meant that digging was not a brutal, generation-spanning struggle, but a manageable, if monumental, task. Communities could carve out rooms, connect chambers, and create ventilation shafts with a level of efficiency that harder stone would never allow. It provided natural insulation from the scorching heat of summer and the bitter cold of winter, creating a stable, temperate environment deep underground. So the stage was set by forces far older than humanity. The earth offered a sanctuary, but it would take a profound and powerful fear to motivate people to accept that offer and descend into the dark. What could compel them to turn this geological opportunity into a necessity for survival? The potential of the soft stone was realized in its most astonishing form just over 60 years ago. In 1963, a man in the town was doing some routine renovations to his home when he made a discovery that would rewrite history. Knocking down a wall in his cellar, he found not more earth, but a dark, mysterious passage. Curiosity led him into a tunnel, which opened into a room, which then connected to another chamber, and then another. He had accidentally uncovered the entrance to a lost city, a labyrinth that did not sprawl across the landscape, but plunged straight down into it. This was, and it remains, the deepest and most elaborate of all the known underground cities, a vertical metropolis carved directly into the living rock. To stand at its top level and peer down is to confront a masterpiece of subterranean engineering. Descends approximately 200 feet into the earth, with at least 18 distinct levels so far uncovered. But this was no haphazard collection of caves. It was a meticulously planned, fully self-contained ecosystem designed to sustain life for extended periods, completely isolated from the world above. You would find not just simple sleeping quarters, but spacious living rooms, communal kitchens, and areas for social gathering. There were stables for livestock, carefully positioned on upper levels with ventilation to manage the animals. Deeper down, you would discover churches with carved altars and crosses, silent spaces for reflection and community in the dark. There were storage rooms for grain, presses for making wine, and even evidence of a schoolroom. Every necessity for physical, social, and spiritual life was accounted for within this stone shell. The architecture reveals a mind preoccupied with security and controlled isolation. Connecting the various levels are narrow, sloping passages that could be easily defended, but the most iconic feature is the massive circular stone doors. These are not mere barriers, but brilliant defensive mechanisms. Carved from single slabs of rock, some weighing up to half a ton, they are shaped like giant millstones. They sit in recessed grooves and could be rolled into place from the inside, sealing a passageway completely. Each major level could be independently closed off, suggesting a terrifying contingency plan. If an intruder managed to breach the upper floors, the inhabitants could simply retreat deeper, rolling these immense plugs behind them, compartmentalizing the city to protect those below. Perhaps the most critical engineering feat, however, is invisible to the eye: the air itself. For a city of thousands to live so deep underground, a constant supply of fresh air was not a luxury, it was a matter of life and death. The builders have solved this with astonishing foresight. They carved over 50 ventilation shafts, some descending more than 100 feet from the surface all the way to the lowest chambers. These shafts acted as the city's lungs, drawing cool, clean air down and allowing stale air to rise and escape. This was not guesswork. It was sophisticated planning that understood airflow, pressure, and the long-term needs of a sealed population. The presence of these shafts tells us this was never intended as a temporary bolt hole. This was a designed habitat, a planned community built from the inside out, with every detail considered for survival measured not in days, but in seasons, perhaps even years. This level of preparation forces a single, chilling question. What kind of threat were they expecting that justified creating an entire world beneath their feet? A world built to be sealed shut from the inside, just a few miles from the sprawling depths of another underground world waits. This is a city that shares the same foundational purpose, but follows a different blueprint for survival, where plunges dramatically downward, spreads out more horizontally, a vast, interconnected hive carved across multiple levels. Its design reveals a distinct organizational philosophy, one that speaks volumes about the daily rhythms of emergency life. The very first level you enter is not a grand hall or a living space, but a series of stables. This immediate placement of animal quarters is a critical clue. It suggests a community that needed to bring its livestock inside quickly, perhaps at a moment's notice, securing their vital sources of milk, wool, and meat before sealing the great stone doors. The living spaces, storage rooms, and communal areas are arranged deeper within, following a logical flow from immediate need to long-term sustenance. The scale of preparation here is staggering. Archaeologists have uncovered massive, barrel-sized storage jars, called pithi, still set into the floors of dedicated chambers. These were not for short-term supplies. They were filled with grain, dried legumes, and oil, the caloric foundation for a prolonged isolation. Intricate water management systems, including carved channels and collection basins, ensured a controlled supply, preventing flooding while capturing precious seepage from the rock. Perhaps most telling are the expansive communal kitchens, with multiple hearths and ventilation chimneys. These were not for individual families, but for feeding a large, coordinated group. Every element points to a society that was not preparing for a brief raid, but for a siege against time itself, an isolation that could stretch for months or even years. This raises a profound and haunting possibility. These two metropolises are not isolated wonders. Local lore and some archaeological evidence suggest they might have been connected by a long, subterranean tunnel, forming the heart of a regional network of refuge. While this connecting passage remains partially unconfirmed and unexplored, the very idea transforms our understanding. It paints a picture not of isolated villages hiding in fear, but of an entire civilization with a coordinated, underground contingency plan. A place where, if danger struck, the population of a whole region could vanish beneath the earth, moving between fortified cities through hidden arteries in the rock. This network represents a level of societal effort and shared anxiety that is almost unimaginable. What shared memory, or what anticipated threat, could have compelled so many communities to invest generations of labor into building a secret world beneath their feet? The answer may lie not in the darkness below, but in the scars written across the sky above. But who carved these stone sanctuaries? The identity of the original builders is a mystery layered as deeply as the cities themselves. For a long time, the most popular story pointed to early Christian communities in the first few centuries, using the tunnels as hiding places during periods of Roman persecution. And it is true, you can find beautiful, simple chapels carved into the rock, with crosses etched into the walls. But these are additions, renovations made to a structure that was already ancient. The underground cities are like a book written and rewritten by many hands over thousands of years. The earliest pages of that book may belong to a people called the Phrygians, a powerful kingdom that rose in this region around the 8th or 7th centuries before the Common Era. They were master stoneworkers, known for carving elaborate facades into cliffs. Some of the oldest architectural styles and techniques found deep within the labyrinths bear a striking resemblance to known Phrygian work. Yet even they might not have been the first. Some researchers look further back, to the mighty Hittite Empire of the Bronze Age over 3,000 years ago. The Hittites were fortress builders, experts in monumental stone construction and sophisticated water systems. The sheer scale and strategic defensive thinking seen in places feel like a project of imperial ambition, not just a village's hiding hole. What emerges is a breathtaking timeline of continuous use. Imagine a vast underground shelter, originally carved by Hittite engineers. Centuries later, Phrygian stonemasons find it and expand it, adding new levels and refining the passages. Then Persian administrators might use it as a secure storage depot. Later, early Christian families, fleeing conflict, discover the entrance and take refuge, carving their churches into the silent rock. Finally, Byzantine monks might use the deepest chambers as secluded places for contemplation. Each civilization left its mark, not by building a new city, but by inheriting and modifying the old one. This is the true enigma. The knowledge of these places was not lost. It was a secret carefully passed down through the rise and fall of empires, a strategic heirloom preserved across generations. The memory of why such a refuge was necessary, the ghost of an ancient threat, must have lingered in the collective mind of every culture that called this land home. They all understood, on some fundamental level, that a day might come when the only safe place was deep within the earth. This enduring fear points to something far older and more persistent than any single historical conflict. It suggests a threat woven into the very landscape itself, a danger that echoed down the centuries, compelling every generation to keep the stone doors ready to roll shut. The sophistication of these underground cities moves far beyond simple shelter into the realm of high-stakes survival engineering. Every technical challenge of sustaining a sealed population for months or years was met with a brilliant, stone-carved solution. Fresh water was the most critical need, and the builders thought like long-term strategists. They did not just dig cisterns to collect rainwater. They engineered deep, dedicated wells that tapped directly into the natural underground aquifers flowing deep within the rock. This ensured a clean, reliable supply even if every river and spring on the surface was poisoned, blocked, or controlled by an enemy. It was a water source independent of the world above. Just as vital was managing what happened after the water was used. A hidden city of thousands could not risk illness, so they carved intricate waste disposal channels, a subterranean sanitation system that carried refuse away from living areas to dedicated, isolated pits. This attention to public health reveals a community planning not just to hide, but to thrive in isolation. The very layout of the corridors was in defensive control. Passages between major sections were often narrow, twisting, and low-ceilinged, forcing any potential intruder to move slowly, single file, into a choke point where they could be easily stopped. This was architecture as a form of crowd control, but for a scenario of ultimate threat. Even the climate was engineered. Deep within the Earth, the temperature held steady at a cool, constant 13 degrees Celsius, or about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the scorching summer or freezing winter on the surface. This was the perfect natural refrigerator for preserving precious food stores and a stable environment to prevent hardship for the population. Perhaps the most quietly ingenious feature, however, were the communication shafts. Scattered throughout the complex were narrow vertical channels, sometimes just wide enough for a voice to pass through. These were not for air or light, but for sound. A person on the 8th level could speak clearly to someone on the 12th, allowing for coordination, warnings, or simply the comfort of human connection across the vast, dark silence, all without ever opening a sealed doorway or compromising security. This detail alone transforms our understanding. This was not a panicked, haphazard digging project. It was deliberate, multi-generational urban planning for a worst-case scenario. Every stone carved, every corridor angled, every shaft drilled speaks of a society that had accepted a terrifying possibility and decided to build a complete, functional world ready to replace the one they might have to abandon. The conventional explanation is one of earthly conflict, a story of hiding from invading armies. For centuries, historians pointed to periods like the Arab raids of the 7th through 10th centuries, when Christian communities in Cappadocia might have sought refuge from cavalry sweeping across the plains. The defensive architecture seems to perfectly support this theory. Those massive rolling stone doors are the ultimate barricade, sealing the community away from any surface threat. The maze of narrow, twisting passages creates a deadly funnel for any armed intruder, while the internal wells guaranteed survival during a prolonged siege. It is a logical, compelling narrative of human versus human, a fortress turned inward. But the sheer, overwhelming scale of these complexes begins to unravel that simple story. Why would a village of a few hundred people invest generations of labor to carve out a labyrinth capable of housing 20,000? It is like building a cathedral to store a single prayer book. The effort is astronomically disproportionate to the presumed threat of a passing raid. Furthermore, the internal layout suggests complexities beyond mere defense against an outside force. Some passages and sealed chambers seem designed not just to keep people out, but to rigorously separate populations within. There are entire sections that could be completely isolated, their ventilation and water supply cut off from the main city. This points to a far more chilling contingency. This architectural evidence opens the door to alternative, and in some ways more unsettling, possibilities. What if the threat was not an army at the gates, but an invisible one moving through the very air? Could these have been quarantine cities, designed to isolate a community during a devastating outbreak of illness? In an era before modern medicine, the only defense against a plague was distance and time. Sealing an entire city underground for months could have been a desperate, last-resort measure of biological containment, a way to let a contagion burn itself out on the surface, while a protected population waited in the sterile dark. The separate, sealed levels would make tragic sense, allowing the healthy to isolate from the sick, preserving a remnant of the community. Another theory looks inward, at the fabric of society itself. Perhaps the greatest danger was not invasion or illness, but a profound and violent schism within the community, a religious conflict or a social uprising so severe that the only solution was a physical separation carved into the bedrock itself. Different factions or faiths could have occupied different levels, living in an uneasy, partitioned coexistence, sharing the same refuge, but divided by stone doors and separate air shafts. The city becomes not just a shelter from the world, but a reflection of a fractured society, its divisions literally set in stone. This transforms the underground from a place of unity into one of enforced separation, a monument to a different kind of survival from each other. Each of these theories, from armies to illness to internal strife, paints a picture of a civilization preparing for a specific, catastrophic end. But what if the truth was even broader? and the architects of these depths were not preparing for a human threat at all, but for a memory of something far more ancient and terrifying, written in the stars, and in the very ground they walked upon. The sheer scale of the cities points to a fear that transcends human enemies. This brings us to the most profound and unsettling explanation, the unknown cataclysm hypothesis. What if these were not built for war or plague, but as a refuge from the sky itself? Some researchers suggest these underground metropolises are part of a global pattern, a recurring architectural echo of an ancient shared trauma. They look to the rich tapestry of oral traditions from cultures worldwide that speak of a great reset, a time when the world was remade by fire, ice, or flood. Could the collective memory of a real, planet-altering event have been the true catalyst for carving a new world into the stone? The idea is that generations who survived a terrible disaster, perhaps a volcanic winter that blocked the sun for years, or the fiery aftermath of a comet fragment striking the Earth, would have developed a survival strategy etched into their very culture. Their paramount lesson would be simple: when the sky becomes the enemy, your only sanctuary is deep within the forgiving earth. This shifts the narrative from hiding from other people to hiding from the elements, from a human threat to an existential, environmental one. The geological record of Cappadocia itself lends chilling support to this theory. This is a seismically active region, shaped by volcanoes and earthquakes. Building underground would offer unparalleled protection from the immediate horrors of such an event, sheltering communities from collapsing structures, from rain of hot ash and pumice, and from the extreme temperature swings that could follow a catastrophe that filled the atmosphere with debris. A sealed city with its own water and air supply becomes the perfect bunker against a toxic, transformed world above. It aligns with a survival strategy for a threat that renders the surface uninhabitable, a strategy born not from paranoia, but from lived, ancestral experience. This transforms the cities from fortresses into arks, stone vessels designed to carry the seed of a civilization through a period of planetary hardship. The architecture then becomes a physical encoding of a story too terrible to forget, a memory of a hostile sky translated into hundreds of feet of protective rock. It suggests the builders were not just anticipating a possible future conflict, but were actively preparing for a past they believed would one day repeat. This idea connects these silent stone chambers to a deep human instinct, the drive to ensure that no matter what falls from the heavens, something of us endures below. This instinct to retreat into the earth is a story written across the globe. Far from the soft tuff of Cappadocia, other civilizations were making the same profound choice, carving their own sanctuaries into mountainsides and digging deep into desert rock. In the district near Beijing, ancient communities carved entire networks of subterranean rooms and tunnels, creating cool, defensible homes. On the other side of the world, the ancestral of the American Southwest built their stunning cliff dwellings into the sheer faces of canyons at places like Mesa Verde, entire villages lifted above the valley floor, yet sheltered deep within the rock itself. And in the arid landscapes of ancient Persia, engineers constructed vast underground aqueducts, called qanats, which were not just water channels, but often included hidden chambers and passages for refuge during times of conflict. These are not coincidences of geography, they are variations on a profound human theme. When faced with overwhelming threat, the response across cultures and continents has been strikingly similar: go to ground. Seek the enduring, protective embrace of the earth itself. This architectural instinct finds a powerful echo in our oldest stories. The collective memory of humanity is filled with narratives of a great cleansing, a catastrophic event that resets the world. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories we possess, tells of a massive, world-covering flood, a divine wrath from which the hero survives by building a great sealed vessel. The biblical story of Noah follows an almost identical blueprint: a dire warning, an ark, and a remnant saved to begin anew. Even Plato's philosophical tale of Atlantis describes a mighty and advanced civilization utterly consumed by the sea in a single day and night. These are not isolated fables. From the indigenous stories of North America to the flood myths of Southeast Asia, cultures that never contacted one another independently preserve tales of a global deluge or a fiery sky. What does this mean? It suggests a deep-seated, perhaps even ancestral, memory of a cataclysm so vast it became woven into the foundational myths of humankind. The underground cities of Cappadocia may be the ultimate physical manifestation of this universal archetype. They are more than just shelters. They are a tangible, engineered response to a mythological fear. While other cultures wrote their warnings on clay tablets or passed them down through oral poetry, the people of this region literally carved their contingency plan into the bedrock. The cities stand as a monumental statement that these stories were not taken as mere allegory or moral lesson. They were received as dire, practical warnings from a past that could, and likely would, repeat. The meticulous planning for air, water, food, and social structure reveals a people who looked at their flood myths and asked a terrifyingly practical question. If the sky falls again, how do we not just survive but preserve our community? Their answer was to build a world that could be sealed off from the sky entirely, a stone ark buried in the earth, waiting for the waters, whether real or metaphorical, to recede. This connection transforms the caves from historical curiosities into something far more profound. They become a bridge between myth and memory, between the stories we tell to explain the world and the drastic, physical steps we are willing to take to ensure our place within it. The true test of survival was not the moment the stone doors rolled shut, but the long, silent months that followed. To live in perpetual twilight required more than stored grain and fresh water. It demanded the careful preservation of the human spirit itself. Evidence from the cities reveals a society meticulously structured to maintain order, purpose, and sanity. Designated areas for worship, often simple chapels with crosses carved directly into the walls, provided a crucial anchor. In the unchanging dark, these spaces offered spiritual solace and a reminder of a higher world, a connection to something beyond the enclosing stone. Communal kitchens and gathering halls were not just practical, they were vital. The shared act of preparing food, eating together, and telling stories by the flickering light of oil lamps would have been the glue holding the community together, fighting the isolation and fear that lurked in every shadowy corridor. Life did not stop, it adapted. The stable, cool temperature of the earth became an advantage, allowing for the careful fermentation of wine and the long-term preservation of food stores. A sip of wine or a shared meal was not merely nutrition. It was a moment of normalcy, a boost to morale in a world stripped of seasons. Children would have been educated, perhaps learning the history of their refuge or the skills needed to maintain it. Crafts like weaving, tool-making, and pottery repair would have continued, their rhythms providing a comforting sense of productivity and continuity. The sound of a loom or the scrape of a stone tool was a declaration that life, not just existence, was continuing. Yet the psychological toll would have been immense. The complete lack of natural sunlight, the constant weight of the earth above, the unchanging artificial day and night marked only by lamp oil, these conditions present profound challenges. Modern understanding suggests that without careful management, the community would have faced struggles with low mood, disrupted sleep cycles, and the intense anxiety of confinement. The architecture itself hints at this awareness. Those narrow communication shafts were not just for security, they were lifelines for conversation, allowing voices to connect across levels and combat the terrifying silence. The very regimentation of society, the assigned tasks, the scheduled gatherings, the religious observances, was likely a bulwark against despair. This was a cultural framework engineered for psychological resilience as much as physical survival. They understood that the greatest threat during a long isolation might not be hunger or thirst, but the slow unraveling of the human mind. Their success in creating a society that could endure such an environment stands as a stunning testament to adaptability, proving that our deepest shelters are not carved from rock, but built from the bonds we maintain in the dark. The true genius of these cities lies not in their grand halls, but in the quiet, unglamorous details of daily survival. Sustaining thousands of people in total isolation required a logistical blueprint of staggering complexity, a master plan for a society in suspended animation. Storage was the first pillar of this plan. Vast chambers were dedicated to nothing but rows of enormous ceramic pots, called pith, each one taller than a person and sunk directly into the stone floor. These were the city's larders, filled to the brim with grains like wheat and barley, dried legumes, and preserved meats. The scale is crucial. It speaks not of a few weeks' supply, but of a caloric reservoir meant to last for many months, perhaps even a full year or more. Alongside these dry goods, two other staples formed the caloric backbone of their sealed world: wine and olive oil. Evidence of presses and fermentation rooms tells us these were not luxuries, but essential, dense sources of energy produced and stored entirely on site. Every meal in the dark was a calculation, a careful drawing from a finite, sealed bank account of sustenance. Yet food was only one part of the equation. Water management was the non-negotiable foundation of life underground. The builders did not rely on fragile surface sources. They engineered deep, dedicated wells, some plunging over 100 feet, to tap directly into the pure, natural aquifers flowing within the bedrock itself. This was a water supply completely independent of the world above, secure from poisoning or siege. But bringing water in was only half the battle. Managing it inside was a feat of sanitary engineering. They carved intricate channels and collection basins to control seepage and prevent flooding, while waste was meticulously channeled away from living and storage areas to isolated, sealed pits far from the water supply. This attention to public health reveals a sophisticated understanding that their greatest enemy in confinement might not be hunger, but illness. Even the simple act of seeing and cooking required immense foresight. Fuel for the oil lamps that pushed back the eternal twilight, and for the limited cooking in carefully ventilated kitchens, would have been a precious, calculated resource. Every lamp lit, every meal warmed, represented a tiny draw on a stored supply of oil or charcoal, another variable in the long-term survival equation. This intricate web of logistics, food, water, waste, light points to a profound realization. Such a perfect, interdependent system could not be created and then left to gather dust for centuries. It had to be maintained, tested, and understood by the living community above. This leads many researchers to believe these cities were used periodically, not just in ultimate catastrophe, but as a form of regular training. Communities might retreat underground for weeks or months during times of lesser crisis, a harsh winter, a passing band of raiders, or a political disturbance, using these events as vital drills. These exercises would keep the ventilation shafts clear, the water systems flowing, and the population trained in the rhythms and routines of sealed life. It was a continuous, generational investment in a capability they hoped never to fully use, a sobering and ancient lesson in long-term risk management written in stone and grain. The silent stone holds its secrets close, but modern tools are beginning to pry them loose. Today, archaeologists are no longer reliant on accidental discoveries or slow, careful digging to understand the true scale of this hidden world. They are using technology that allows them to see through the earth itself. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses into the soil, painting a ghostly image of voids, tunnels, and chambers deep below, while three-dimensional laser mapping creates perfect digital models of the known labyrinths. This technological sight is revealing a staggering truth. What we have uncovered so far may only be the beginning. The known cities are likely just the largest nodes in a vast, regional network of subterranean refuge, with countless smaller complexes and connecting passages still waiting in the dark. Recent scans in the modern city of built atop ancient Cappadocia, have detected anomalies hinting at a subterranean complex so enormous it could seem modest by comparison. The implications are breathtaking, suggesting an underground civilization far more extensive than anyone dared to imagine. Each new chamber uncovered adds another piece to a sprawling, multi-millennial puzzle. The artifacts pulled from the dust tell a story of continuous adaptive use. In one room, you might find a simple bronze tool from the Hittite era, its design unchanged for over 3,000 years. In another, a delicate oil lamp from the Roman period, and on a wall nearby, a carefully etched Byzantine cross. This layering of objects is the physical proof of the theory of inherited sanctuary. It confirms that these were not single-use shelters, but strategic assets preserved and modified by every culture that called this landscape home. They were heirlooms of survival, passed down through the rise and fall of empires. Yet for all the physical evidence, a glaring silence persists. There are no contemporary written records, no clay tablets or scrolls that explicitly state, "We built this city to survive X." The purpose was so universally understood by the builders and their descendants that it never needed to be written down, or those records were lost to time. This absence forces researchers to become detectives of dirt and stone. They are now analyzing microscopic clues to build a reliable timeline. By studying soil layers trapped in sealed chambers, they can detect periods of use and abandonment. Pollen samples extracted from ancient dust can reveal what plants were growing on the surface when a doorway was last sealed, offering clues about the climate outside. Meticulous analysis of construction techniques, the tool marks, the architectural styles, helps separate Hittite work from Phrygian, Byzantine from earlier periods. The goal is to match these underground expansion phases with known historical events or climatic data from the world above. Was a new level carved during a period of intense seismic activity? Did a phase of construction coincide with a documented era of political instability or a sudden climatic shift recorded in ice cores from Greenland? Each potential link is a thread slowly being woven into a broader tapestry of understanding. Researchers are not just digging for treasure, they are excavating for context, hoping to finally answer the central haunting question that echoes up from every dark corridor. What specific fear, remembered or anticipated, was powerful enough to motivate such a monumental, multi-generational project? The puzzle is immense, but with every radar scan and soil sample, the picture of a civilization preparing for an unknown cataclysm comes slowly, hauntingly, into focus. A sudden shift in the climate could rewrite the entire purpose of a civilization. This is where the story of the underground cities intersects with a fascinating and chilling scientific discipline known as paleoclimatology, the study of ancient weather patterns. Researchers are now asking if these stone refuges were a direct response not to armies, but to a sky that had turned against them. One of the most compelling clues comes from a period in the mid-6th century, specifically between the years 535 and 536. Historical records from across Europe and Asia describe a bizarre and terrifying 18-month period where the sun grew dim, casting only a feeble bluish light, even at midday. Summer snow fell in places it never had before, and temperatures plummeted across the globe. This is now known as the Dust Veil event, a climatic mystery often linked to a massive volcanic eruption, perhaps in Indonesia or Iceland, that spewed so much ash and sulfur into the upper atmosphere it effectively dimmed the sun's rays for over a year. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Global cooling triggered widespread crop failures, followed by devastating famine and social unrest. Imagine living through that. The world grows cold and dark in the middle of summer. Your fields wither under a weak, strange sun. The secure rhythm of seasons, the very foundation of agricultural life, shatters without warning. In such a scenario, the logic of the underground cities becomes starkly, brilliantly rational. If the surface world is suddenly plunged into a volcanic winter, where could you go? The answer is into the earth, where the temperature remains a constant, life-sustaining 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Those deep wells provide water uncontaminated by falling ash. The massive stores of grain and oil become the difference between life and a slow decline. The sealed ventilation shafts protect your lungs from a toxic atmosphere. What was once seen as a fortress against human enemies transforms into a perfectly designed bunker for an environmental apocalypse. This perspective reframes the entire endeavor. It suggests the builders were not driven by superstitious paranoia, but by a sharp, observational pragmatism. They were adapting to observable, terrifying environmental degradation. If tree ring data from ancient forests shows a period of stunted growth, a year without summer, could we then find evidence in the rock itself of rushed construction or frantic modification in the cities during that same era? The alignment of these two records, one written in wood, the other in stone, would be powerful. It paints our ancestors not as primitive people hiding from shadows, but as resilient problem solvers facing a clear and present danger. They saw the climate changing, felt the cold, watched the crops die, and they activated a generations-old survival plan. In this light, the underground cities become monuments not to fear, but to foresight. They represent a rational, evidence-based response to a world suddenly turned hostile, a chillingly familiar echo of our own modern conversations about environmental adaptation and resilience. The connection invites a humbling thought. Perhaps the gap between their time and ours is not as wide as we believe. They built stone arks against a changing climate. What are we building today? The stone doors were not just physical barriers, they were thresholds into a sacred space. To understand the full power of these underground cities, we must move beyond the blueprints of survival and into the realm of belief. For the people who carved and occupied these depths, descending was not merely a tactical retreat, it held profound symbolic weight. In countless ancient worldviews, the earth was not inert dirt and rock. It was a living, protective entity. The underworld was often seen as a place of primordial memory, of safety, and most importantly, of rebirth. To dig down was to return to the womb of the Earth Mother, seeking her ultimate protection from a sky that had turned hostile. This spiritual dimension transforms every tunnel from a passageway into a pilgrimage, every sealed chamber from a room into a sanctuary. The immense labor of carving a city by hand takes on a deeper meaning when it is framed as a devotional act, a collective prayer made manifest in stone. This is especially clear when we look at the early Christian communities who found refuge here centuries later. They did not just occupy empty caves, they actively shaped the stone to reflect their faith. They carved simple, beautiful churches directly into the living rock, with altars, pews, and crosses etched into the walls. Holding a service in such a place would have been a powerful physical metaphor. It mirrored their core concepts of spiritual refuge and resurrection, the belief in emerging from a dark place into the light of salvation. Their place of physical hiding became, simultaneously, their most profound place of worship. The two needs, survival of the body and salvation of the soul, were fulfilled in the same sacred act of digging. This symbolic layer provided a powerful psychological and social glue. It offered a metaphysical justification for the staggering generational effort. It was not just about fearing an enemy, it was about fulfilling a cosmic order, about aligning with a protective, ancient power greater than themselves. The community was not just hiding, they were participating in a ritual of return and eventual renewal. This belief system would have been essential for morale during those long, dark isolations. It transformed a frightening act of confinement into a purposeful spiritual journey. The city became a sacred landscape, a map of both physical and metaphysical security. Every meal shared in the dim lamplight, every prayer whispered in a subterranean chapel reinforced a powerful idea that they were not just waiting out a catastrophe, but being spiritually prepared by the earth itself for whatever came next. This intertwining of the practical and the sacred may be the final, masterful key to their resilience. It suggests that to survive an unknown cataclysm, they knew they needed more than grain and water, They needed a story, a belief that gave their immense sacrifice a meaning that reached beyond the stone. Perhaps the most compelling mysteries are the ones that end with a wall. Deep within the labyrinthine passages of these cities, explorers have encountered tunnels that do not simply narrow or fade into rubble, but terminate with deliberate, finished barriers. These are not collapsed corridors, but carefully constructed walls of mortared stone, sealing off passageways with a clear and purposeful finality. The question they pose is haunting. Were these seals a practical safety measure, closed off by later inhabitants to stabilize a shaky section of ceiling or to better control the complex airflow within their sealed world? Or do they represent something far more intriguing, a literal dead end in our exploration, hiding chambers we have yet to even imagine? The presence of these sealed portals fuels some of the most dramatic speculation. Could they be the forgotten entrances to connecting tunnels that once linked to, or to other, still-lost cities, forming the true underground network of legend? Some theorists go further, suggesting these sealed sections might protect the most sacred or secret spaces of the original builders, perhaps even holding physical records, clay tablets, scrolls, or artifacts that could finally name the architects and state their purpose in their own words. Modern science has begun to peer beyond the mortar without breaking a single stone. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive scans have, in several locations, detected the unmistakable signatures of voids, open spaces, lying just beyond these sealed walls. The discovery is electrifying, confirming that the sealed passages are not merely fill, but doors. Yet the pace of discovery is intentionally, painstakingly slow. Archaeologists face a profound ethical and practical dilemma. To break through a seal is an irreversible act, one that could destabilize the delicate microclimate that has preserved the city for, allowing humidity, modern bacteria, or structural stress to damage whatever lies within. Each potential chamber is approached not as a treasure vault to be raided, but as a fragile time capsule to be understood first. So these walls remain, standing as the ultimate symbols of the city's enduring secrecy. They are literal barriers in our quest for knowledge, silent reminders that for all we have uncovered, the full story of these subterranean worlds is still partially locked away in the dark. They force us to sit with an uncomfortable but fascinating possibility that some secrets are buried not to be lost, but to be kept, protecting a truth we may not be ready, or perhaps even meant, to fully uncover. The silent endurance of these cities is itself a marvel of forgotten science. To walk through a chamber carved 3,000 years ago and see not a single crack in the ceiling is to witness an engineering triumph that defies time. The builders possessed a masterful, intuitive understanding of the forces at work within their soft stone canvas. Their primary concern was the relentless, crushing weight of the earth above, and their solutions were both elegant and enduring. They never carved a simple, flat ceiling across a wide room. Instead, they meticulously shaped every overhead surface into a gentle arch or a perfect dome. This curvature is the secret to their longevity, as it naturally distributes the immense vertical pressure outward along the curve of the stone, channeling the load down into the walls and, ultimately, into the solid bedrock below. It is the same principle that would later allow Roman aqueducts and Gothic cathedrals to stand for centuries, yet here it was being employed deep underground, by cultures whose names we are still piecing together. They thought like the mountain itself, leaving strategic pillars of untouched bedrock as natural supports, creating grand halls that feel open yet are fundamentally secure. Modern structural engineers who study these spaces express a kind of professional awe. They note that the techniques for shoring up tunnels and managing subsurface stress align closely with methods documented by Roman miners and even early coal mining operations 2,000 years later. This hints at a lineage of practical underground knowledge, passed not through textbooks, but through the slow apprenticeship of stone and tool. Yet, within this familiar framework lie flashes of what seems like unique genius. Take the communication shafts. Their function for conveying sound was clear, but the precision of their acoustic properties is startling. The diameter, the smoothness of the bore, the specific angles at which they intersect different levels, all appear optimized to carry the human voice with minimal distortion across vast vertical distances. This is not just a hole in the rock, it is a designed auditory instrument. Achievements like this fuel a compelling theory that the creation of these complexes was overseen by a specialized class of artisans, a guild of subterranean engineers. These would have been the master planners who understood geology, statics, ventilation, and hydraulics as a single, interconnected discipline. Their knowledge was likely oral and experiential, transferred from master to apprentice over generations, a living library of how to sculpt a safe hollow into the earth. When the societal need for such vast refuges finally faded, that rare and specific expertise would have faded with it, leaving behind only the perfect, silent proof of its existence in the enduring stone. We are only now, with our scanners and sensors, beginning to reverse engineer their silent lessons, rediscovering principles of sustainable underground living that they perfected ago. These stone labyrinths were more than physical shelters, they were psychological lifeboats. The architects understood that to survive a long confinement, they had to design for the human mind as carefully as they designed for airflow and water supply. This is why the layout often features large, open central spaces, like plazas carved from the living rock. These were not just practical expansions, they were vital social infrastructure. In a world of endless twilight, these halls would have been the heart of the community, a place for gatherings that fought the creeping isolation. Here, leaders could share updates, calming rumors and reinforcing a shared purpose. Here, families could come together, the simple sound of other voices and the sight of familiar faces becoming a powerful antidote to despair. The rhythm of communal life, shared meals, storytelling, even planned activities, would have been a critical tool to maintain a sense of normalcy and morale when the world above had become anything but normal. Equally telling is the quiet, persistent presence of faith etched into the walls. Crosses, altars, and small chapels are found not as afterthoughts, but integrated into the living quarters and communal areas. This iconography served as a constant anchor, a visual promise of a higher order and hope beyond the immediate crisis. In the face of an unknown and potentially world-ending threat, these symbols provided a framework for meaning, helping individuals process fear and hardship not as random suffering, but as part of a larger, enduring narrative. It was a psychological bulwark, offering solace and a sense of control in a situation defined by its lack of it. The entire environment was engineered to provide this control. The constant temperature, the predictable layout of corridors, the regimented routines for food distribution and maintenance, all of it created a controlled, predictable microworld. This predictability was a direct counter to the terror of whatever chaotic, unpredictable event was happening on the surface. Inside, the rules were known, the environment was stable, and the needs were met. This stark contrast between the ordered refuge and the presumed chaos outside would have been profoundly calming, reinforcing the choice to stay sealed within the stone. Yet, this security came with a necessary cost. Such close quarters living for months on end, under immense stress, required an ironclad social structure to prevent panic and internal conflict. There had to be clear leadership, assigned roles, and strict rules governing resource use and behavior. Disputes that might be minor on the surface could become fatal underground. The architecture itself may reflect this enforced hierarchy, with certain levels or chambers possibly reserved for leaders, guards, or spiritual guides. This was not a democratic utopia. It was a survival state, where social order was the final, essential layer of defense against the collapse of the community from within. In this light, these underground cities become some of humanity's earliest and most profound experiments in designing for collective trauma. They were attempts to build a complete psychosocial ecosystem, a buffer that protected inhabitants not just from falling rocks or poisoned air, but from the paralyzing psychological chaos of a world unraveling. They recognized that to outlast a cataclysm, you must preserve not only the body, but the bonds, the beliefs, and the very sanity of the people huddled together in the dark. The true measure of their success is not that they were built, but that they were designed for a community to emerge from them, intact and ready to begin again. This architectural echo of survival is not confined to the caves of Cappadocia. If we expand our view, a fascinating pattern emerges across the globe, one that moves beyond simple cliff dwellings into the realm of the truly monumental. In the high Andes of Peru, the fortress presents a staggering puzzle. Its outermost walls are constructed from colossal stones, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together with such impossible precision that not a single blade of grass can slide between the joints. The stones are not rectangular blocks, but polygonal shapes with complex angles, interlocking like a giant, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle carved from solid granite. Mainstream archaeology attributes this to the incredible skill of the Inca civilization, and rightly so. Yet, a persistent question lingers among some researchers. Why employ such an astronomically difficult building technique for a defensive wall? The standard explanation of superior fortification is logical, but the specific choice of polygonal masonry has another, intriguing property. This interlocking style is exceptionally resistant to seismic activity. In an earthquake-prone region, these walls would not simply crack and collapse, they would shift and settle as a unified, flexible mass, absorbing the Earth's tremors without failing. This is not just good engineering, it is engineering for catastrophe. A similar whisper of an ancient, resilient blueprint can be heard on the Giza Plateau in Egypt. While the pyramids are rightly celebrated as tombs and symbols of power, their foundational geology and core masonry raise their own questions. Beneath the visible limestone casing, the core blocks of the Great Pyramid are fitted with a meticulous, almost forgotten precision. Furthermore, the entire structure sits upon a massive, leveled limestone bedrock that itself acts as a monolithic foundation. The orientation and the sheer, enduring stability of these structures in the face of environmental stress lead some to wonder if, beyond their ceremonial purpose, they also embody a principle of permanence, a form of architecture designed to outlast not just kings but epochs. The key connection here is not a literal one of shared builders or direct contact, which mainstream scholarship rightly questions. It is a thematic resonance, an idea known as. This is the belief, found in the myths and philosophies of countless ancient cultures, that history is not a straight line, but a series of great cycles. Each age or world ends in a cataclysm, a great flood, fire, or upheaval, only to be followed by a new beginning. If your cultural memory or spiritual teachings hold that the world is periodically destroyed and remade, how would you build? You would build to endure. You would encode resilience into the very fabric of your most important structures. The polygonal walls of Peru and the geometric mountains of Egypt might be expressions of this principle above ground, just as the sealed cities of Turkey are expressions of it below. They could be different answers to the same profound, haunting question, posed by separate civilizations who never met. What do you build when you know, or deeply believe, that everything can be washed away? One culture answered by creating indestructible anchors on the landscape, monuments to defy the shaking earth. Another answered by creating hidden arks within it, sanctuaries to wait out the storm. This does not require a lost global civilization, but it does suggest a possible thread of shared ancient wisdom, a hard-earned understanding of our planet's capacity for violent change. This wisdom was not written in books, but encoded in stone, in the choice of an interlocking angle, in the depth of a ventilation shaft, in the orientation of a foundation. It is the architecture of memory, a physical plea from the past to the future, a silent testament to the enduring human desire to leave a mark that even the sky cannot erase. The silent cities beneath Cappadocia are not just relics, they are a mirror. In our modern world, marked by global health challenges, environmental shifts, and the shadow of geopolitical tension, their purpose resonates with an uncomfortable clarity. We may not carve our shelters from volcanic rock, but the ancient impulse to prepare for a worst-case scenario is more alive than ever. Look at the rise of contemporary preparedness culture, where individuals stockpile supplies and plan for disruptions. On a vastly larger scale, governments invest in continuity of operations facilities, hardened complexes designed to ensure leadership and essential functions survive a catastrophic event. These are our technological descendants of the rolling stone door, sophisticated bunkers built for the same core purpose, to preserve a kernel of civilization through a storm. The underground cities force a stark and vital question upon us. What are the existential risks we collectively downplay or ignore today? Is it the long-term instability from a changing climate, the potential of a global health crisis, or the fragility of our interconnected systems? Our ancestors looked at their world, identified a profound vulnerability, and acted across generations to mitigate it. Their response was carved in stone for all time. What is ours? The true lesson of and is not found in the grain jars or the air shafts, but in the social blueprint they represent. Resilience is not merely a stockpile of food or a fortified location. It is the strength of community bonds, the preservation of essential knowledge, and the ability to maintain a functioning, adaptive social structure under extreme duress. They teach us that the most critical resource in any crisis is not what you have in your storehouse, but who you have by your side and the shared understanding of how to endure together. This ancient wisdom, etched deep into the earth, suggests that our modern preparations might be incomplete if they focus only on physical security and neglect the human architecture of survival. The stone chambers remind us that to outlast an unknown future, we must build networks of mutual support and foster a culture of shared responsibility, creating not just shelters for bodies, but arks for our collective humanity. The very act of opening these sealed cities to the world now threatens their existence. Today, and our celebrated UNESCO World Heritage Sites, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors each year who walk the same stone corridors once reserved for a society in hiding. This global fascination, however, has created a profound and modern dilemma, a delicate balancing act between public access and permanent preservation. The silent, stable microclimates that protected these spaces for thousands of years are incredibly fragile. The simple breath of a crowd, the humidity from our skin, and the dust from our shoes introduce subtle contaminants and alter the delicate balance of moisture in the air. Over time, this can encourage the growth of microbial life on the ancient walls or cause the soft tuff to degrade in ways it never did during its long isolation. The stone that withstood imagined cataclysms now faces a slow, steady erosion from the footsteps of its admirers. In response, conservationists have become the new guardians of this underground world, implementing a careful science of controlled access. Visitors follow specific, reinforced pathways designed to minimize contact with the most sensitive surfaces. Specialized lighting systems produce minimal heat, and in some areas, discrete air filtration units work constantly to scrub the atmosphere, mimicking the pure, still air of the past. These measures are a form of modern engineering, not for survival, but for stewardship, creating a bubble of artificial preservation within the opened labyrinth. Yet, this necessary protection exists in constant tension with the undeniable benefits of tourism. The revenue generated supports the local economy, funds ongoing research, and crucially, raises global awareness. This awareness transforms the sites from obscure historical footnotes into shared human landmarks, ensuring their story continues to be told. It is a poignant echo of the city's original paradox, a cycle of opening and sealing that defines their entire history. For centuries, they were opened during times of crisis as sanctuaries, then sealed to protect their contents for an unknown future. Now, they are opened for education and wonder, while teams work behind the scenes to seal them metaphorically from the wear of the present. Managing these ancient refuges has become an ongoing, real-world experiment in a universal question. How do we safeguard the physical evidence of our past while still allowing it to breathe, to teach, and to inspire those living in the present? The answer is not found in a permanent seal or in unrestricted access, but in the difficult daily compromise between the two, ensuring these stone arcs can sail from our era into the next. Despite decades of careful study, the silent stone guards its deepest secrets. We can map the corridors and analyze the tools, but the fundamental questions of why and how remain tantalizingly open. What specific event, what singular moment of terror or foresight triggered the very first, largest phase of construction? Was it a specific invasion, a volcanic eruption witnessed by an entire generation, or a prophetic warning taken to heart? The scale suggests a coordinated, society-wide mobilization, yet we find no contemporary chronicles, no royal decrees or merchant records describing this staggering undertaking. For a project of such magnitude to leave no paper trail in the civilizations that used writing is a profound silence. It implies the purpose was either so obvious it needed no explanation, or so sensitive it was deliberately kept from record. How was such a generational effort funded and organized? This was not a weekend community project. It required planners, engineers, foremen, and a steady supply of laborers, all while the surface society continued its daily life. Were workers paid from a communal treasury, or was it a form of required service, a tax paid in sweat and stone for the collective future? The logistics boggle the mind, pointing to a level of social cohesion and long-term vision we can scarcely comprehend today. And what still lies hidden? Ground-penetrating radar hints at voids behind sealed walls, fueling the dream of a final, undiscovered chamber. Could there be a hidden level, a sealed archive containing clay tablets or a library that holds the builder's own testimony, a message carved not for their time, but for ours? The possibility that a single room could explain everything is the archaeologist's greatest hope and most elusive ghost. Perhaps the most poignant question of all is why the practice eventually stopped. Did the feared cataclysm simply never arrive, allowing the memory of its threat to slowly fade into myth over centuries? Or did a later society, confident in its own strength or different beliefs, consciously decide to abandon the old ways, viewing the deep shelters as relics of a superstitious past? The doors were rolled shut for the final time, and the knowledge of how to maintain the vast machines of survival gradually slipped away, until they were remembered only as legends, then forgotten entirely, then rediscovered as mysteries. These open questions are not failures of research. They are the lifeblood of historical exploration. They ensure that the underground cities remain not static museums, but active, breathing puzzles. They invite each new generation to look at the evidence with fresh eyes, to ask new questions, and to keep digging, both in the earth and in the imagination, for answers that remind us how much we still have to learn from the silent world beneath our feet. Beyond the boundaries of conventional history lies a realm of speculation, where the sheer scale of the underground cities sparks a different kind of question. Could such an achievement point to knowledge from beyond our world? This fringe theory suggests the precision of the ventilation systems, the flawless acoustic properties of the communication shafts, and the staggering logistical foresight required might hint at guidance from an external, non-human intelligence. Proponents argue that the project feels like a leap, a technological outlier that seems disconnected from the known capabilities of the Bronze Age or even the classical world. They see in the perfect curves of the ceilings and the deep, straight bore of the wells a signature of advanced understanding, a blueprint possibly shared from a source not of this earth. It is a narrative that attempts to explain the awe we feel by placing its origin among the stars. Yet, mainstream archaeology and history stand on a different foundation of evidence. Scholars firmly attribute every carved inch to human ingenuity, collaboration, and generational perseverance. They emphasize a crucial, often overlooked truth: when an entire society is unified by a profound, existential motivation, the survival of their community and their way of life, the scope of what humans can achieve expands dramatically. Given enough time, a clear purpose, and a communal effort spanning centuries, there is little our ancestors could not accomplish with simple tools and brilliant minds. The theory of external influence, while not supported by any physical evidence, is perhaps best understood as a cultural symptom, a testament to the breathtaking scale of the accomplishment. These subterranean metropolises so profoundly challenge our assumptions about ancient capabilities that they feel alien to our modern timeline. Attributing them to outside forces is, in a way, an expression of humility and of wonder. It is our own minds stretching to comprehend a feat that redefines the limits of early human potential, a silent, stone argument that our history may hold depths we are only beginning to acknowledge. The silent corridors of N have not remained buried in the past. Their haunting imagery, that powerful blend of claustrophobia and resilience, has tunneled its way directly into the heart of modern storytelling. We see their influence not in history books alone, but on our screens and in our games. The underground cities have become a foundational setting for post-apocalyptic fiction, a ready-made stage for narratives of survival after a world-ending event. In the classic film adaptation of H.G. The Time Machine, the gentle, subterranean live in cavernous ruins that feel directly pulled from Cappadocia's depths. More recently, the acclaimed video game series Metro 2033 sends players into the tunnels of the Moscow subway, a grim, modern echo where humanity huddles after a global conflict, facing internal strife and unknown horrors, a scenario that would feel chillingly familiar to the ancient builders. These are not casual references, they are a form of cultural recognition. When creators need a potent visual and conceptual shorthand for a society driven underground, they instinctively reach for the blueprint these ancient places provide. The stone doors, the ventilation shafts, the communal plazas carved from rock, all become instantly recognizable symbols of a last refuge. This cultural adoption is a mirror. It reflects a profound shift in our collective fears. Where the original inhabitants might have feared a specific environmental collapse or invasion, our modern stories project onto those same stone walls anxieties about nuclear winter, pandemics, or artificial intelligence gone awry. The setting remains timeless, but the nature of the imagined cataclysm updates with each generation. In reimagining these ancient refuges for a futuristic nightmare, we are engaging in a silent dialogue with the past. We are asking the same fundamental question they did, just with different details. What does a community need to survive when the world above is lost? How do you maintain order, hope, and identity in the endless dark? By placing our own fictional survivors in these archetypal underground spaces, we are, in a way, testing their ancient solutions against our modern fears. This cycle of inspiration reveals something beautiful and profound. These structures have completely transcended their original, practical purpose. They are no longer just historical sites. They have become powerful, living symbols in the ongoing human story. They represent the eternal, universal dance between the fear of annihilation and the stubborn, enduring will to persist. Every time a filmmaker lights a scene in a fictional subterranean city, or a game designer models a labyrinthine safe haven, they are paying homage to that ancient impulse to carve a space for tomorrow out of the solid rock of today. The cities, in their silent way, continue to host new generations, not of refugees, but of storytellers and audiences, all gathered to contemplate the oldest question of all, how we endure. The ultimate legacy of these cities is not carved in stone, but woven into the fabric of the society that built them. To create such a refuge required a radical reorganization of human effort, a social contract written not on parchment, but in the very act of digging. This was not a project for kings or conquerors alone. It demanded the synchronized work of master engineers who understood geology and airflow, of countless laborers swinging stone tools for generations, of farmers who produced the surplus grain to feed those workers, and of leaders who could sustain a vision far beyond their own lifetimes. Every level of society had a role, and every role was essential for the survival of the whole. This represents a breathtaking shift in human priorities, from short-term gain to intergenerational stewardship. They were not building palaces for the present, but arks for a future they might never see, trusting that their children's children would be the ones to need the sanctuary. In this light, the rolling stone door becomes more than a barrier. It is a symbol of a shared promise, a collective vow to protect one another from a threat too large for any individual to face alone. This ancient model stands in stark contrast to much of our modern world, which often prioritizes individualism and immediate results. Their achievement whispers a challenging question across the centuries. When we perceive a large-scale, slow-moving threat to our way of life, do we still possess that same capacity for unified, long-term action? The cities are a physical testament to the idea that humanity's greatest projects emerge not from competition, but from a profound sense of communal destiny. They organized not for conquest, but for continuity, proving that our species can mobilize its brilliance and labor for preservation as powerfully as it can for expansion or conflict. The silent, waiting halls are a monument to patience, to the understanding that some solutions require a timeline measured in generations, not election cycles or fiscal years. Perhaps this is their most urgent lesson for us today. In an age of complex global challenges, from environmental shifts to the fragility of interconnected systems, the story of these underground networks is in resilience thinking. It teaches that true security is not found in isolated bunkers stocked for one, but in resilient communities built on trust, shared knowledge, and a commitment to the common good. The builders knew that to survive an unknown cataclysm, they needed more than grain and water, they needed each other. They needed the social architecture to cooperate under immense pressure, to manage scarce resources fairly, and to maintain hope in the endless dark. This legacy of stone and solidarity asks us to consider what we are building together now, and what kind of world we are preparing to leave, not just for our own children, but for the countless generations whose names we will never know. The quiet stone may yet have its stories to tell, not through shovels, but through scanners. The next chapter in understanding these cities will be written not by picks and trowels, but by light and data. Imagine a technology that can see through the Earth from an airplane. That is exactly what LiDAR does, using laser pulses to create a hyper-detailed three-dimensional map of the ground's surface. In forested or rugged areas, this can reveal the subtle, hidden contours of ancient settlements completely invisible to the naked eye. Applied to the Cappadocian landscape, it could potentially identify the faint surface signatures of undiscovered ventilation shafts, collapsed entryways, or even the outlines of entire city layouts buried under centuries of soil, guiding researchers to new sites without a single disruptive dig. Beneath that, advanced ground-penetrating radar is evolving into a form of subterranean sonar, sending signals deep into the rock and returning increasingly clear images of the voids and structures hidden below. These tools promise a future where we can map entire hidden networks, understanding the true regional scale of this underground civilization from the safety of the surface. The very dust underfoot holds a biological archive waiting to be read. Scientists are now developing techniques to extract ancient DNA and microscopic environmental clues from the sediment layers of these sealed chambers. This is not about finding grand artifacts, but about reconstructing the invisible details of daily life. By analyzing this genetic and microscopic residue, researchers could identify what plants were stored or even cultivated in special lighted chambers. They could detect the presence of specific animals, revealing more about the livestock kept in those upper-level stables. Most fascinatingly, they could map the microbiome, the community of microbes that lived alongside the human inhabitants. This data could tell us about their health, their diet, and even the sanitation conditions within the sealed city, painting a vivid, intimate portrait of the ecosystem they maintained in the dark. For the wider world, the future may offer access through a digital doorway. Proposals exist to use these immense datasets from scans and surveys to build fully immersive, interactive virtual reality models of the entire underground network. This would allow students in a classroom on the other side of the planet, or someone with mobility challenges, to walk the narrow corridors, stand in the grand plazas, and look up a 100-foot ventilation shaft toward a simulated sky, all without ever setting foot in the fragile environment. It is a form of perfect preservation through digital replication, granting global access while minimizing physical intrusion. The future of understanding, therefore, lies in a powerful blend of non-invasive science and profound respect. Each leap in technology is not about conquering these spaces, but about listening more closely. It brings us nearer to the day when we might finally hear the faint echoes of the thousands who breathed that recycled air, who touched those walls, and who maintained their watch in the deep, silent hope for a dawn they could not see. From the soft volcanic rock of Cappadocia, ancient civilizations carved a message in stone. It is a message not of conquest, but of contingency, a blueprint for survival etched into the very bones of the earth. The silent, waiting halls of and are far more than archaeological curiosities. They are time capsules of human psychology, a physical manifestation of our deepest relationship with fear and the future. Whether the specific threat was a passing army, a volcanic winter that blotted out the sun, or the ghost of a cataclysm whose true name is lost to time, the response was the same: a collective retreat into a world of their own making. This monumental effort challenges everything we assume about ancient priorities. It reveals societies capable of staggering long-term vision, willing to invest generations of labor not in monuments to the present, but in arcs for a future they hoped would never come. Their work speaks of a profound understanding that the greatest threat to a community is not always the enemy you can see, but the one you can only imagine. In preparing for the unimaginable, they forged a powerful unity, driving innovation in engineering, social organization, and even spiritual practice. The rolling stone door stands as a symbol of that unity, a shared promise to protect one another from a sky that might one day fall. As we walk through our own modern world, with its unique anxieties and global uncertainties, these cities beneath our feet pose a quiet, persistent question. They ask us to look beyond our short horizons. What are we building today, not for next quarter or the next election, but for the humans who will walk this earth 10,000 years from now? What stories will our stones whisper to them? Our ancestors left a refuge carved in tuff, a testament to resilience in the face of the unknown. Their legacy is not just the labyrinth, but the lesson it carries, that preparing for tomorrow is the most profound act of hope we can offer to the future.